If you've made a selection that's relatively complex, or one that you think you may want to use again in the future, it makes sense to save that selection so you can bring it back at any time and use it again. To show you how to do that, I have a photograph, and on top of the photograph, I have this design, these two rectangles. I'll turn off the background layer for a moment so you can see that the two rectangles are on their own layer. Let's start by selecting those two rectangles. Now here's a little trick for selecting objects on a transparent background. If you hold down the Command key, that's the Control key on Windows, and click on the thumbnail on the layer with transparent pixels, the design layer, that selects only the non-transparent pixels on that layer, in this case the two rectangles. Now I'm going to go to the Tools panel and select the Elliptical Marquee tool. And I'll make sure that the Intersect With option is highlighted in the options bar. Now I'll make a circular selection, which can be a little tricky, so you may have to practice a couple times to get it just right. I'll come into the image and I'll start dragging an oval selection. Then I'll hold down the Shift key to constrain the selection to a circle. Then, with my finger still on the mouse and another finger still on the Shift key, I'll hold down the space bar too, and I'll push the circle up and to the left where I want it. Then, still keeping the mouse and the Shift key held down, I'll release the space bar and continue to drag. When I'm happy with the selection, I'll release the mouse and the Shift key, and here's the result. So let's make use of this selection. I'm going to fill it with color on the design layer. So I'll select the design layer, and then I'll go up to the swatches panel, and I'll select a color. You can choose any color you like. And then I'm going to use the shortcut for filling with the foreground color, and that's Option Delete on the Mac or Alt Backspace on Windows. Now, since it took me a little while to make this selection, I'm going to save it, and that will give me the option to bring it back in the future and make a change. I'll go up to the Select menu, and I'll choose Save Selection. I'll give the selection a name. I'll call this My Circle, and I'll click OK. And then I'll deselect by pressing the shortcut Command-D on the Mac or Control-D on Windows. So now let's say that I've saved and closed the image and some time has gone by, and I want to go back in and change that purple circle. Even at that point, I can load my selection back in. I'll go up to the Select menu, I'll choose Load Selection, I'll go to the Channel menu, and I'll choose my selection by name. And then I'll click OK. To make a change, I'm going to go over to the Tools panel and select the Eyedropper tool and select a color from the image. And now I'll fill the selection with that new color by pressing Option Delete on a Mac or Alt Backspace on Windows. And then I can deselect Command-D on Mac or Control-D on Windows. Now here's a little bonus information. As you get more advanced in Photoshop, you may want to know more about what's going on under the hood. And when you save a selection, what's happened is, if you go to the Channels panel, you'll see that there is a channel that represents that selection. But in most cases, you won't have to go to the Channels panel to work with a saved selection. You can do it just the way I showed you by saving and loading selections from the Select menu.